Okay, so I want to talk about a tweet that I posted the other day and some of the response it got. And this is the basic idea behind the tweet. The idea is the fact that you were once a Christian does not automatically mean you had a proper understanding of Christianity. This is a part of a general observation. The fact that you were once X does not entail that you understood all of what it is to be X. So let me turn to the tweet itself, and then we'll look at some of the responses that it elicited from some of my atheist friends online. So here's the tweet. Note to my atheist friends, the fact that you once called yourself a Christian does not mean that you had a proper understanding of what Christianity is. Indeed, if you had a bad experience, that experience may be an obstacle to your proper understanding. So again, this is really, I think, something of a simple and straightforward point. The fact that you once lived in New York City, let's say you lived for several months in the Bronx in an apartment, doesn't mean that you understand all of what it means to live in New York City. The fact that you once did a degree in philosophy does not automatically mean that you have an informed perspective on philosophy. And we can just go on down the line. So the fact that you were once a Catholic, and not just Christian, but a Catholic, doesn't mean that you understand Catholicism very well. Now that's one that I can say that, interestingly, I've seen Protestants convert to Catholicism and Catholics convert to Protestantism. And in many cases, what I've seen is that among the most vociferous critics of Catholicism are former Catholics, and among the most vociferous critics of Protestantism are former Protestants who became Catholic. And what this suggests to me is that sometimes when people undergo a deconversion experience, then in fact their entire experience gives them a more skewed understanding than they would have had otherwise. Now, the important point I really want to emphasize here is that the experience that you had could actually, rather than be providing you with a special authority to understand Christianity, it could actually skew your understanding. So that sometimes experience is worse than no experience at all. To give you an example of that, I live in the city of Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Well, let's say that there are two people, Smith and Jones, and Smith has never been to Edmonton, but Jones was in Edmonton. Jones was in Edmonton in July 1987 for a few days, and during that time, that's when Edmonton was hit with a massive tornado and 27 people were killed, and this was like this unique event in the history of Edmonton. So when Jones leaves Edmonton now, he has an experience that Smith never had. He's actually been to Edmonton. But hope we can see that his understanding of what it is to live in Edmonton, a city that has never, in any other case, to my knowledge, been hit by a tornado, let alone one that created fatalities, let alone more than 24 fatalities. The fact that he had that experience has actually skewed his understanding of what it would be to live in Edmonton. So sometimes having an experience is worse than no experience at all. If you were raised within a Westboro Baptist type church, and that was your experience of what the church is, and that's all that you've known of Christianity, and you reject Christianity as a result, then that could skew your understanding of Christianity even far worse than if you had no Christian experience at all. That's the kind of the basic point I'm making. Now, let's go look at some responses to my tweet. There were many from atheists, and one of the points I want to address at the outset, but I'm not going to put up a tweet because I actually couldn't find it looking for it again this morning. This was a person who said, "How dare you judge my experience? How dare you, judge my truth?" So the idea being that I was judging their truth, quote unquote, by saying that their experience of Christianity didn't automatically qualify them to make categorical assertions about the truth or falsity or otherwise of Christianity. But I wasn't judging their experience. They may very well have had a bad experience. I have no idea as to what their experience is. The only claim I'm making, and it's really a modest but important claim, is that your experience doesn't automatically qualify you to make universal declarations about Christianity. All it does is equip you to make authoritative statements about your experience. And so with that in mind, let's look at some of the other misbegotten responses. So this first one from a fellow named Marc, he says his response is to say, well, Christianity is whatever someone claims it to be. In other words, he's arguing a sort of skeptical explosion that if there's any disagreement about what Christianity is, then there's no fact of the matter about what Christianity is. And I offered Marc this response. By the same token, this is what we call a tu quoque. So I'm giving him a response along the same lines that he initially gave me. I said, well, by that logic, atheism is whatever someone claims it to be. Naturalism is whatever someone claims it to be. Humanism is whatever someone claims it to be. Just keep going, bud. Like, if you are going to argue for a skeptical explosion as to the meaning of the term and application of the term Christian, then just apply that to everything else as well. Because the fact is that all of these terms are what we can call essentially contested concepts. In other words, there's no universal agreement among language users as to precisely what constitutes a Christian, atheist, naturalist, or humanist. In all of these cases, there is a general agreement about the application of the term, and then there are also fuzzy boundaries, and there's a contestation, there's a dispute about precisely what, or if there is a clear boundary of in or out as to these different terms. So it's nothing that just applies to Christianity. You can say that about all sorts of things. Because essentially contested terms, what is a true Democrat, right? What is a true American? What is a man, right? That's a one that's been questioned in recent years, increasingly, with explorations or the fact of people exploring transgender identity issues. All of these sorts of questions. We can go on and on all day about questioning boundaries like this. So it's just a misbegotten response. Let's turn to the next one. A fellow named Xenophobe says, what about the fact that I was a sincere and devout believer who taught Sunday school, preached, was a deacon, studied apologetics, did countercult work, read a broad spectrum of history and theology, and witnessed to people? If my claim is suspect, then every believer's claim is too. Okay, a few things I want to say in response to Xenophobe. Well, the first thing I want to say is Xenophobe's comment is just frankly also irrelevant, because I never made the claim that a person who was once a Christian cannot make an informed judgment about Christianity. What I said was that a person cannot automatically make an informed judgment simply in virtue of having been a Christian, right? There's a difference there. Xenophobe may be able to make an informed judgment about Christianity. That's certainly possible. I didn't claim otherwise. I'm simply claiming that the fact that you were once a Christian doesn't automatically qualify you to make that judgment. And so this should open up a little bit of critical introspection for the atheist or the former Christian to consider whether or to what degree their experience may have skewed them, and to recognize that it didn't automatically predispose them to make informed, rational, critical, nuanced, charitable judgments about Christianity. That's the first point. Second point is, when I read over Xenophobe's description, I will say this. I do know people who can basically appropriate the same description that Xenophobe has here, who are not fair, critical judges on Christianity. One of them is John Loftus, the fellow with whom I wrote the book God or Godless and had several debates with him. I think John Loftus is a terribly uncharitable critic of Christianity. You could probably ask, well, then why'd you write a book with him? And that's a whole other conversation. I do think the book God or Godless is well worth reading, but I don't think John Loftus is generally a critical and charitable and nuanced critic of Christianity. He was once a Disciples of Christ, I believe it was, or Churches of Christ pastor, and that's his background, and he has a lot of history with the church. He's got master's degrees in theology. That didn't do him any favors, however. I think he's and you just have to look at his work on Christianity to see, Debunking Christianity, as his website is called, to see how uncharitable he is. So the fact that Xenophobe has these descriptions doesn't automatically tell me whether Xenophobe is informed or not. I just don't know. I will say this as well. Xenophobe refers to having done countercult work. Well, the language countercult suggests a conservative Protestant background. And conservative or fundamentalist Protestants don't necessarily have the most charitable intellectual histories. They can have a lot of emphasis upon Bible memorization and a particular stream of education, but often it can be a little bit more indoctrinational than educational. And so that may be the case in Xenophobe. I don't know, but in that case, Xenophobe may not have been well equipped to assess Christianity. I don't know either way, but I never made a claim either way about individuals. And now this brings me to the most common persistent response from people, and in some ways also the most sort of irksome, because it's just so misguided. And this is to accuse me of committing the no true Scotsman fallacy. So what the no true Scotsman fallacy is, it's an informal logical fallacy in which a person in an ad hoc fashion revises the criteria for class membership. So for example, you say, no Scotsman. I'm not going to try a Scottish accent. I'll do it without that. You can say this. No Scotsman would hate listening to bagpipes. And then you could say, well, Haggis McHaggis from Edinburgh doesn't like listening to bagpipes. And then, so what that person has now said is this is a defeater or an objection to your claim that no Scotsman would not like listening to bagpipes, because Haggis McHaggis is a Scotsman. He doesn't like listening to bagpipes, so that's evidence against the original claim. But now if the person making the original claim revises it in an ad hoc fashion simply to say, well, no true Scotsman would not like listening to bagpipes, that is called the no true Scotsman fallacy. It's an ad hoc revision of the criteria for class membership. And so the claim of Warakuna here, and of several other people, many other people on Twitter, atheists I suppose, all made the same assertion, is that I'm committing the no true Scotsman fallacy by claiming this person never was a genuine Christian. That's not what I said at all. It has nothing to do with what I said. I didn't say the person wasn't a Christian. I said the person having been a Christian is not automatically qualified to make informed judgments about Christianity. And I pointed out further that their experience as a Christian may very well have distorted their understanding of Christianity. So this is the way I responded to to Warakuna with the Haggis McHaggis comment. So many inane and ill-begotten no true Scotsman rebuttals. I'll throw yours on the pile. In the meantime, try to figure out what's wrong with telling your friends not to visit Mexico because your wallet was stolen 20 years ago. Now what I'm saying there, I hope you can see, is I'm saying what I was actually talking about. What I was actually saying is if you visited Mexico 20 years ago and your wallet was stolen and you had a bad experience at the vacation resort, that doesn't mean that you are now, and your experience has now qualified you to make statements about whether Mexico today is a good vacation destination. You are not equipped to do that. In the same token, if you had a bad experience at your rural Kentucky Baptist church in the 1980s, that experience does not automatically qualify you to make informed judgments about whether Christianity on the whole is likely true or likely committing or contributing to the common weal or the public good or not. You're not informed to make those kinds of sweeping judgments based simply upon your experience at a rural Baptist congregation in Kentucky in the 1980s. That's what this whole tweet was about. So to talk about the no true Scotsman fallacy is just to talk about something irrelevant. So this brings me back to the original point. The fact that you were once X, in this case a Christian, does not automatically mean you had a proper understanding of Christianity. Now, what is revealing about the responses that this single tweet gained from all of these different atheists, skeptics, free thinkers or whatever, is that it suggests to me, because they were so poor in being able to even read what I was saying or respond to it or engage with it critically, is that they are not nearly as much the sort of critical, free thinkers, rational beings that they would like to think. All I was saying is if you really want to be a rational, critical, free thinker, turn a skeptical eye to your experience in the past. Consider whether that experience has actually equipped you to make informed, rational judgments about a worldview you now reject, or whether your experience may have distorted and skewed your understanding of that reality, in which case you should maybe revisit the extent to which you reject that reality, such as Christianity, or that position, based upon your experience. Maybe it's time to rethink your position.